Hi everyone! So I made my video talking about how to farm gold efficiently in Season 4 the other day. If you haven't seen that, you might want to check it out. There are some valuable tips. Gold has become a really valuable currency, either for enchanting, for masterworking, or just trading your items. And I want to give you some tips on how to not spend that much gold, in particular through enchanting, because there are some important things that a lot of people don't know, I think. So what you need to know about enchanting is that it has a ramping cost. I guess this comes as no surprise. When you go to the occultist and you try to enchant an item, here this one for example starts at 93k, and then when you do a roll it will go to probably like 200k and then 500k and then 800 and so on. And it kind of ramps up. So in Season 4 the gold cost has been capped for enchanting. It depends on the exact item and the item power, but it's somewhere in the range of like 3 to 8 million cap or so, depending on the item, which is still a pretty high cap. So this means it's like at least a whisper turn in or two just to do like a one roll once it reached that cap, and this reaches after, I don't know, maybe 20 rolls or 30 rolls or something like that. Most people don't have the goal to even go there because they just don't get enough. You see here I have like 470 million and I've been blasting this season so far. I've been doing whispers all the time. So at least if you don't get a lot of gold income from other sources, from players, through trading, then it doesn't really come in that quickly. But there are some ways to be very smart about your gold economy in order to get the maximum benefit out of it. So the number one thing to do is whenever you farm and you find these items that you might want to, for example, temper or enchant or something like that, you should try to get multiple copies of similar items. So you see this here. So I have like my stash, for example, laid out. I have like my one-handed weapons here. I have like my helms and my boots here. I have my chest and my pants here. So it's kind of like throw in all kinds of like good pieces that have decent rolls. Not necessarily only with greater affixes, because it's also possible that you do tempers and then you don't get what you want and the item is bricked. But yeah, most of the time it's nice to just have a bunch of copies, because every time you start on a fresh item with enchanting, the gold cost resets and you spend way less. So this is step one. So in this case, for example, whenever I would like to go craft on an item and I want to make a new build or something, I would start with like the best version that I have. For example, this one here has a greater life affix, has a high roll on dex, and then it has like one missing stat. You would try to roll this to maybe something good. And then maybe I'll try like 2 or 3 or 4 rolls. And if I don't get it, maybe I'll move on to the next one. However, just enchanting and potentially running out of gold is not necessarily the biggest problem here when you make a new item. It's also the tempering. And the good thing about tempering is it actually doesn't cost any gold. So when you go to the blacksmith, you can basically temper for free in the late game. It costs a few materials like 2 baleful fragments and 7 veil crystals and a bunch of iron chunks. It's basically nothing when you have like a late game character and you like farm up a lot of stuff, and you can just go and take this item and temper. So this is for free, and you can kind of see in advance if the item would even possibly be useful after enchanting for you. So most of the time I would recommend, when you have those multiple copies of items, you go and temper first and try to see if you actually get the mod that you want to get, because if you don't have to hit a temper, there's actually no way to fix the item. At least with enchanting, you can roll over and over and you could painfully farm up a lot of gold if you really have to, and still fix the item later on. But with tempering, this is not possible. So you should usually go for tempering first and enchanting later. However, when it comes to enchanting, you also need to know that some of the modifiers are much harder to roll than others. And this is also something where a bit of game knowledge is important, but also just the general concept you need to understand in order to not waste your gold. So what Blizzard has done with the update in Season 4 is that they have made some affixes extremely common and some affixes very rare. There's a big weighting system introduced in this enchanting system now that previously wasn't the case. So what I mean here is, for example, we have dexterity, int, strength, and so on. All these main stats, they are very high in weight. They appear on basically every other item if you look at this. So you see here there's dexterity, there's none, here's dexterity, there's none, here's dexterity, here's dexterity, here's dexterity, here and here and here and here, and so on. So you see how often dexterity shows up, for example. This has a very high weight. It's like probably the highest that exists. And then you also see life, for example. You have a lot of items here with life. This helm here has dexterity and life. And there's nothing here. There's life here. And then nothing. Here's life. Here's life. Here's life. And here's life. So you see, like when you go and collect loot, you can see a lot of these same stats popping up over and over. This was part of the intentional redesign of the item drops on the ground, making them generally useful for basically every build. So they put a lot of main stats and these like maximum life stats and a few others as very common roles on these items. But what it also means is that it's way harder to roll away from those stats in order to get something else. So let's say, for example, we take this item here that has dex, life, and percent damage, and let's say for whatever reason you want to go full glass cannon, you don't want to have that maximum life roll on your weapon anymore, which is usually a good roll to keep for basically every build, but let's say you don't want to. Now, if I want to try to roll this life roll away to, let's say, crit damage, you see there's actually a bunch of options here. And all these options don't necessarily have the same weight. In fact, the crit damage, overpower, vuln, and damage over time, they're actually all of the same category. And as long as none of them are present, you can roll any of them. So let's say I want to hit exactly the vulnerable damage because I'm playing Heartseeker Rogue. I would have to roll off the life, which is very common. And you see here, life pops up yet again. And then we can do another roll, and you see life pops up yet again. And it just keeps coming back every single time. Here I got lucky, I got the vulnerable damage on the third roll. But you see the life is basically always an option on this thing. So it's very hard to like roll away from life, for example, in order to get something else. So usually in the case of weapons, for example, it's much better if you have a weapon that already has the specific damage stat that you're trying to roll. For example, here the vulnerable damage in my case, or maybe crit, or maybe damage over time, or something like that. If you have a weapon that already has this, like this one here, this one has vulnerable damage already. And you see here, if you try to roll the vulnerable damage, there's way more options than, for example, when I try to roll the dexterity. So in this case, if this item already has vuln and life, it will be extremely easy, almost guaranteed, to roll dexterity as the last stat. Or for example, the life the same. If this thing has vulnerable and dex, and then I can roll the life extremely easily and also go for a high roll. You see there's like a high range here, like the maximum is roughly 40-50% higher than the minimum roll. So it's actually quite the gap here between a good roll and a bad roll. And in a case like this, where life is so easy to get, you could actually try to roll a few times in order to get a really juicy roll out of it as well. This also means that, for example, when you're looking for an item on a trade site like the Crimson Market, then you want to try to hit those stats that are hard to roll on the item present already. That makes the item much more valuable because you're going to spend much less gold and materials actually rolling them later on. So a sword like this here that has dex, greater life, and vulnerable damage already pre-rolled is just way more valuable than, for example, this weapon here, which technically could be rolled into the same stat. But you do have to go to the enchanter and then roll this percent damage into vulnerable damage. And this might cost you 5 attempts, 10 attempts, dozens of millions of gold, basically. And if you get unlucky, well, you're gonna have a much worse time trying to get this item ready compared to this. And the same concept applies to a lot of other items as well. For example, skill ranks. If you're trying to get a certain skill-specific affix, for example, we have a glove here that has +3 to barrage. If you're playing a rogue, then this is a really nice glove because it has the ranks to barrage, it has dexterity, which is a fine stat to have, and then you just need to basically roll this damage over time to any good damage stat like attack speed or crit or something like that, maybe life even if you really want, and then the item is finished. But for example, if you have another glove like this one, you may think, wow, this one has attack speed and a greater crit. Now I'm going to take off this life roll and put barrage there. Well, you're going to have a bad time because of the same reasons. We have life roll that you're trying to replace, which is a very common affix, and you're trying to roll a skill-specific one, which is, you know, one of these many affixes here that also has a kind of low weight on top of it. So it's like no way that you're going to roll into barrage unless you get extremely lucky. If I had to guess, this would probably be something like a 1 in 30 or at least or so. So by that time, you probably have spent 100 million gold in order to try to hit that. Whereas, for example, if I take this glove here that has barrage present already, but no greater affix, I just have like a near guaranteed, out here with either attack speed or some crit or, anything. I can just try it right now, for example. And you see here, okay, we get armor, we get some res, we get some more res, here's some life. This is already 4 rolls, and here's vulnerable damage, so this could be something, for example, for a victimized build. Here's life again. We already had 5 rolls, and you see I'm trying to roll something that is much easier to roll than barrage. Here's lucky hit, for example, that could be something. Here's rest again. We're like at 8 rolls now, and here I got attack speed finally. But you see, at this point, I've already spent like probably 2-3 million gold or so if you add it all up. And now I got attack speed, and now I actually have like a decent glove here that I could use for a barrage build. Whereas, you know, if you try the same here, it's just like a complete lottery, basically, trying to hit that barrage ranks. So if I have to decide, for example, for stash space reasons, to keep one or the other glove, I would much rather keep this glove that already has the skill ranks over this one that has the greater affix. Now, you can still try your luck. You know, as I said, it's not impossible to roll this barrage or any other skill, but it's just extremely unlikely, and you're going to run out of gold really fast. So it's much easier to just kind of keep these items around. And I think also just for trading, if you're looking to buy an item, for example, for a specific build, you want to look for those skill ranks that you actually try to get already. The same also applies to some other stats. If you look at, for example, this helm here, this helm is really nice. It has a greater dexterity roll, it has a life roll, and then has this impairment reduction, which is kind of trash. So you try to roll off this. And let's say you want to get like cooldown reduction, not even a skill or something. You think, hey, cooldown reduction is always nice, a lot of builds kind of want that. And then you start rolling this thing and try to get cooldown reduction. Well, you have the same story here. Cooldown reduction doesn't really have like a high weight from what I can tell. But yeah, some other stuff does. There's energy per second that shows up all the time. There's healing received, life per second, and then eventually resistances. And you see here, I'm already like 5-6 rolls deep, and there's no cooldown reduction to be found. And if you have a helm like this, for example, that already comes with cooldown reduction, you're going to have a much easier time taking this item and finishing it. And for example, rolling off the cold resistance here to get, let's say, dexterity. So if you take this, you're going to get dexterity or life. Here's life as well, which is not bad. Probably like on the second try or so. Here it is. So we got the dex. And now we actually have a usable helm in case you care about the energy per second. Whereas here, you know, this has a greater affix, it's better, but you're just never gonna get that cooldown reduction. Same story as with the gloves. And the same also applies, for example, for amulets. When you have amulets and you, let's say you have like movement speed and crit chance already, but then you want to roll like a certain passive or so, well, do not try to get that really. Like you can try the lottery and, you know, roll 5 times or something like that, maybe 10 times if it's like a really good amulet. But at that point, at some point, you just have to take the loss and move on basically. So in this case, you know, if you want to get a specific aspect, like I played a Heartseeker right now, I really want the exploit ranks, you kind of need to find the amulet with the passive already present, because you just have almost no chance to roll it. You can maybe try to get a random other passive if you keep rolling it. So this one here, I got a pretty juicy crit roll, for example, right now. Now if I roll this again, maybe, you know, I try to get something, but it's already at 2 million gold per roll, and 2 million is not a joke really. So you want to make sure that you don't waste your gold, especially rolling amulets or rolling for these skill ranks on like a glove or something on the chest. You know, if you want to get, let's say, Dark Shroud ranks, many rogues want that. You kind of need to find the chest that already has this present. And going back to the topic of tempering, in some cases it may actually be the better decision to go and enchant first and see what you get before you do the tempering. As I said earlier, tempering doesn't actually cost gold, so it's not really a huge downside to waste a few materials, but it's also time that you have to spend, and you have to like collect these items, and you have to try to roll them, and you have to, you know, find them again from your stash and so on. So there's a lot of like micromanagement going on sometimes when you have a bunch of these items like, you know, ready to go. Depending on how hard it is to roll a certain stat, it may not be such a bad idea to like also just enchant a few times. See if you get lucky with, you know, maybe a roll that you try to hit, and then go for the tempering. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a full list available of which stats are the more common ones versus which stats are the more uncommon ones, but I can tell you like Dex and all these main stats and Life, they are pretty common, and then there's probably like some mid-tier affix rarity like attack speed, crit, and these kind of things, lucky hit I suppose, that are kind of just like showing up pretty decently. And then you have like some of the more rare affixes, like all the skill ranks, they seem pretty rare. Then you have the passive ranks, you have yeah, maybe stuff like the chance to make enemies vulnerable on rings, for example, if you're trying to rely on that. I think this is extremely rare here, for example. So it comes down a bit to like gut feeling and just looking at the items and kind of understanding how often do you see certain stats in order to get a bit of a feel for it. Maybe this is possible to data mine. I'll see if I can find any resource about this or so, but so far I have not found anything and I've not seen anyone compile such info. But this is how the system works, so I guess that a lot of people might not have been aware of this, and this is how you can actually save yourself from a lot of trouble rolling your items. Make sure you don't overcommit, because you need that gold in order to masterwork your gear. Masterworking a single piece to 12 is something in the range of like 30, 40 million gold or something like that. It's quite a lot of gold. And you really want to keep that gold around for the masterworking purposes. Also, when you try to reset it, it's a lot of gold. It's like 5 million. And then you have to do a bit for the conversion and so on. So don't overcommit on the enchanting. Rather, try to get decent items, even if they don't have greater affixes. Like, I'm totally fine running with boots like this here. They have the 3 stats that I want: dex, life, speed, and they got the right tempers. And yeah, they can be improved. You know, they could be a lot better with greater affixes, but sometimes you just don't get what you want on the tempers, and sometimes you just can't enchant them. So you kind of roll with what you got. But having those items that have the right stats, the hard to get stats already present, and then enchanting the easy stuff is usually the better way to handle it. And that's also it for this video here. So hope you enjoyed this. Hope this helps you. I wish you good luck with the rest of Season 4. Let's see if Blizzard ever changes something about the system as well, or if you get any news about the exact stat weights, maybe with like a table or something. That would be really amazing. I hope that maybe in the future we're going to see an update to the enchanting system a little bit, where, for example, enchanting actually prefers the more rare stats and the drops on the ground prefer the more common stats. I think that would probably make more sense, so that you can like take an item and, you know, change it to your liking, and you don't have to find that exactly, like, you know, +3 skill rank glove or the +3 dark shroud chest or something like that. But for now, this is how it works, so it's important to be aware of it. And that's it for this video. Hope you like this, and see you guys next time.